There's this idea floating around that all our big problems, the housing crisis, the climate crisis, the political gridlock, are basically inevitable, that we're just stuck in an era of scarcity. But the book Abundance argues that this is all wrong. The situation we're in, it's not our destiny, it's a choice, and we can choose differently. For decades, American politics has been trapped in a loop. You have the Republican supply-side approach, basically cut taxes and hope for the best. George H.W. Bush once called it voodoo economics. And well, it hasn't exactly delivered the boom it promised. On the other side, you have Democrats focused on the demand side, giving people money to buy things like health insurance subsidies or housing vouchers. And those programs are important. But here's the catch. If you help people afford something that is fundamentally in short supply, you just drive up the price. Giving someone a voucher for an apartment doesn't help if there are no apartments to rent. The result is what we have now, an affordability crisis where everything from a house to a college degree feels like it's on an elevator racing upward, and we're just trying to climb a ladder to catch it. There's that classic American saying, "Go west, young man," but the guy who said it, Horace Greeley, actually went to New York City to make his fortune. For generations, the real path to getting ahead in America wasn't the frontier. It was our bustling cities. But today, that path is blocked. The new frontier, our most innovative cities like San Francisco, Boston, and New York, have put up a giant no trespassing sign in the form of million-dollar homes. A former New York City mayor even called his city a luxury product. That's a huge problem, because cities are supposed to be escalators into the middle class, not exclusive penthouses. So why are these cities still so important in our hyper-connected world? Because the modern economy isn't just about making things, it's about creating ideas. Innovation happens when talented people are physically close to one another, sparking new ideas. But this concentration of talent has made these superstar cities unaffordable for almost everyone else, especially the service workers who make them run. So who's to blame? The book points a finger at a culprit, a certain brand of local progressive politics. You see yards with signs saying kindness is everything, but these same neighborhoods often fight tooth and nail against building new apartment buildings. It's a case of being symbolically liberal, but operationally conservative. This resistance started getting serious in the 1970s. That's when a house stopped being just a place to live and became the primary financial asset for most families. Suddenly, homeowners had a massive incentive to protect their investment by blocking any new development that might lower their property values. This homeowner activism merged with the rise of a powerful and necessary environmental movement. But well-intentioned laws designed to stop polluters were soon weaponized to stop everything, including desperately needed housing. The sad irony is that the solutions of one era became the problems of the next, leaving us with a housing crisis that has shut down a major pathway to the American dream. Now the biggest building project of all, tackling climate change. There's a fringe idea called degrowth, which says rich countries need to slam the brakes on their economies to save the planet. But this runs into a political buzzsaw. We've seen how people react to even small spikes in gas prices. It causes protests worldwide. Pushing for scarcity isn't a path to a green future, it's a path to political disaster. The good news is, we don't have to choose scarcity. We're living through a technological miracle. The cost of solar power has dropped 90% in a decade. Wind power is down 70%. It is now cheaper to build new clean energy than to keep running old coal plants. The writer Bill McKibben puts it beautifully. The sun burns, so we don't need to. We can have a thriving modern economy without choking the planet. But first, we have to build it. And the scale is mind-boggling. The vision is to electrify everything, swapping out about 1 billion gas-powered machines in the U.S. for electric ones. A Princeton study calculated that to power all this, we'd need to cover an area the size of 5 Midwestern states with wind and solar farms. We'd need to build a national supergrid to move that power around. Which brings us to the hard part. America has forgotten how to build big things. Just look at California's high-speed rail project. Voters approved it in 2008. It was supposed to connect LA and San Francisco by 2020. Well, it's past 2020. The full line has been abandoned, and even a shorter segment is billions over budget and years behind schedule. In the time California has failed to build a few hundred miles of track, China has built over 23,000 miles. Why? The construction industry in America is uniquely choked by veto points. From local neighborhood groups to endless regulations, every project is a political battle, rewarding people who are good at navigating complexity, not people who are good at actually building things. This brings us to a tough question. What if the biggest obstacle to the government achieving its goals is the government itself? In San Francisco, an affordable housing project for the homeless called Tahanan was built in just 3 years at a relatively low cost. Its secret? It was built with private money, which allowed it to sidestep the mountain of rules that come with public funding. Compare that to Los Angeles. In 2016, voters passed a $1 billion measure to build 10,000 apartments for the homeless. By 2024, only about 4,300 were built, at a staggering cost of nearly $600,000 per apartment. The system is so complex, with funding from a dozen different sources, each with its own rules, that it's become what one official called an absolutely insane system. This comes from 2 core problems. The first is everything bagel liberalism. We try to cram too many goals into one project, and it collapses under its own weight. The CHIPS Act was supposed to be about one thing: bringing computer chip manufacturing back to the U.S., but the funding rules also required companies to submit plans for affordable childcare, workforce diversity, and more. All worthy goals, but is a Taiwanese semiconductor company the best vehicle for solving America's childcare crisis? The second problem is a crisis of state capacity. We've hollowed out the expertise within our government, outsourcing everything to expensive consultants. But there's another way. When a bridge on I-95 collapsed in Philadelphia in 2023, the initial estimate for the rebuild was months. But the governor, Josh Shapiro, signed an emergency declaration that cut through all the red tape. They empowered the people on the ground to make decisions and just get it done. The result? The highway reopened in just 12 days. It shows that real legitimacy comes from a government that is capable, responsive, and actually gets things done. Sometimes you can't just build your way out of a crisis. Sometimes you have to invent your way out. We all know the story of the COVID vaccines, a true miracle of modern science. But the real story started decades earlier with a Hungarian scientist named Katalin Karikó. She was obsessed with a little-known molecule called mRNA, believing it could be a powerful new kind of medicine. The scientific establishment, however, was not convinced. For years, she applied for grants, and for years, the answer was always no. Her ideas were seen as too risky. She was eventually demoted and pushed out of academia. Then the pandemic hit, and the mRNA technology she pioneered saved millions of lives. Her story is a huge triumph, but it's also a cautionary tale. It exposes what the book calls the Karikó problem. Our science funding system has become biased against risky, unconventional ideas. We're in what some call the great science slowdown, where it takes more and more research to get smaller and smaller breakthroughs. We're turning our best scientists into administrators who spend nearly half their time just writing grants. But there are other models. There's DARPA, the defense agency that invented the internet and GPS by empowering brilliant people to take huge risks. There's the old Bell Labs, which gave its scientists the time and space to pursue long-term projects without worrying about quarterly profits. To invent the future, we need a better system for funding science itself, one that embraces risk and nurtures the next Katalin Karikó. We think of progress as a series of brilliant flashes of insight, like when Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in a petri dish. But here's the part of the story we usually skip. 13 years after his discovery, penicillin had been used on just a handful of patients. The real story of progress isn't about invention. It's about deployment. During World War II, the U.S. government took penicillin from a stalled science project and turned it into a medical miracle. They figured out how to mass produce it, paid companies to build new plants, and turned it into a life-saving drug. We didn't just invent it, we figured out how to use it. Now contrast that with solar power. Americans invented the first practical solar cell in the 1950s. But then, in the 80s, the government pulled back support. As America stepped away, other countries, especially China, jumped in. China mastered the art of building at scale, and today it dominates the solar industry. An investor named John Arnold put it perfectly. America has the ability to invent. China has the ability to build. The first country that can figure out how to do both will be the superpower. It all comes down to a choice. We're at the end of a political era, and we're facing a fork in the road. One path is a politics of scarcity, which thrives on blaming outsiders for shortages that we ourselves created. The other path is a politics of abundance. We're starting to see the signs of it emerging with things like the YIMBY, Yes in My Backyard movement, which is pushing to make it easier to build homes. Abundance isn't just a checklist of policies, it's a new way of looking at the world. It's about asking, what is scarce that should be plentiful? What is hard that should be easy? It's about rediscovering the American character of a nation of builders. The Apollo program wasn't a response to a disaster. It was a political choice. We can make those same kinds of choices today. This is a story that has to be built not just with words, but with bricks and steel and solar panels and transmission lines. It's a vision of a liberalism that builds.